Jump to Sunday's lesson, which is the fall in heaven, the war in heaven that Russell was referencing. With our understanding of God's true law in mind, the design law that Russell was just mentioning, how did Satan get a third of the angels to rebel? How did he do it? The lesson refers to Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, both which describe Lucifer in heaven becoming infatuated with himself and wanting to promote himself rather than use his abilities to bless others. He became self-referenced and grandiose and prideful. But what issue did he raise in heaven? He called God's character and justice. What's justice? When you hear that, what is justice? Doing what's right. Yes, he called God's method of rightness, the way God made decisions. He called it into question. God's not right. God's wrong. He called his character and justice into question. He suggested God was unfair, played favorites, was arbitrary, made up rules to make things just work out the way he wanted. But what issue did he raise to suggest unfairness? How could he turn to perfect sinless beings and say, see, God's not fair. He plays favorites. He makes up rules. He's not designer. He's just a dictator. What issue could he point to?
Christ.
Lucifer suggested there was no difference between Lucifer and the pre-incarnate Christ.
He basically suggested that perfection is an arbitrary idea, that there is no such thing as true perfection, even in God.
Well, that was the allegation, that God was imperfect for sure. But the wedge that he used to make the allegation, the thing he pointed to as evidence was Christ and Lucifer are the same, but God plays favorites arbitrarily. God makes preferences. He arbitrarily chooses one over the other for certain special privileges. 1 Timothy 6:16 says that God lives in unapproachable light. Unapproachable by whom?
Finite beings.
Finite beings. That's exactly right. God is infinite. Can your mind assimilate infinite knowledge? Even if you want to, can it?
Can.
It is impossible for a finite being to assimilate affinity. It would consume you. Anybody saw that last Raiders of the Lost Ark movie? It actually depicted this at the end of the movie, this idea. They had these alien species, and this human person was very evil, wanted all their knowledge for herself. And at the end, she had this huge, so they gave it to her. They poured it upon her, and at a moment, at the first moment, it's like, rapture. But then very quickly, she became uncomfortable and started, but stop, no. And they just kept pouring the knowledge upon her. And it completely melted her down. She actually burst into flames in the movie. From this overwhelming, because it was more than they had so much knowledge they were pouring into her. She couldn't handle it. It just destroyed her. Finite beings cannot enter infinity. Yes?
Well, this is probably a stupid question. I don't know if anybody's ever thought of this before, but if sin had never existed before, how did Satan even think about it? Where did it come from?
Yes, the idea of where it came from, the scripture says, within Lucifer. Why it came, though, there's no explanation. There's no rationale. There's no justification. There's no reasonable reason. There's an unreasonable reason, but not a reasonable reason. Because if there were a reasonable reason that you could explain it, then it would actually be justifiable and sensible. But it's nonsense. It's insane. There is no reason for it. There is no justification. There was no cause for it. But it was possible in an atmosphere in which genuine liberties occur and sentient beings are truly free.